Today's youth need teachers, volunteers, and most of all, well, they need you. I'm Doug Edwards, and I'm going to be talking with real youth mentors and students to give you the knowledge you need to be the best youth worker possible. This is Youth Worker on Fire.
Oh, you're trying to bring me down and run me out of town. You're taking what you want, but you can't take my rhythm now. I'm walking to my own beat, just gonna be me. I'm not replicating nobody.
Hey everybody, Doug Edwards here with Youth Worker on Fire, and today I've got Avery Hooper with me. Now she's famous to me because she had no idea that I thought she was famous. In fact, I've known her mom since her mom was in middle school, and I heard about Avery when Avery was in middle school because of Fellowship of Christian Athletes. And then I saw her for the first time just a few days ago, and time flies. So I find out she's graduated from high school. She's getting ready to go to college. So Avery, how did that happen?
I mean, you're right. Time does fly. But yeah, it was amazing meeting you a few days ago. I didn't know you had that connection to my mother, but that was just a godsend to meet you. And now we're here today.
Yeah, I feel the same way. And if you want to go back and listen, you can look up Bria Hooper, and it was actually Bria Croak Hooper, who I knew in middle school. And you can go back and listen to her interview. And middle school is where actually I met her, and her mom and I had gone on some adventures. In high school as well with student ministry. Avery, though, is a stand-up gal for Jesus on her own. You did start FCA in middle school, right?
Yes, sir. I started in 6th grade.
Yeah, I thought so. I thought that's what they said. Tell us a little bit about your involvement in FCA over this middle school and high school, these years. Tell us how you got involved, why you got involved, that sort of thing, and just your story there.
So it all started in the beginning of 6th grade when I was listening to announcements, and they announced that they were having their first FCA meeting. And I had no clue what that was, but my mom asking what I learned at school today, I said, well, there was this FCA thing, and do you know what it stands for? Because at that time, my mom knew everything in my head. She just knew everything. And she actually recognized it as Fellowship of Christian Athletes, and she knew the teacher that was putting it on. So my mom helped me arrange to get to that meeting on a school day, and I actually had a couple friends show up to that meeting. And I did not know it was a leadership meeting, but I found out when I got there. And there was about 5 6th graders and a singular 8th grader there. So it was a pretty young leadership team. And so for the first year, I decided to be the secretary. And I was good at taking notes. I was very quiet, very reserved. And I was the secretary my 7th grade year. And finally, my 8th grade year, after much persuasion from my my teacher who led the club, she was like, you should really go out for captain. And so I did. And she was so glad I did. And I don't know if you know what Fields of Faith is, but it's an event put on by a school where they invite a bunch of other FCAs, and there's games and there's speaking and there's music. And so that was the year we decided to do our first Fields of Faith. And I was chosen as a speaker. And I was terrified because I had grown up with a speech impediment. So I was very quiet, very reserved, very scared of talking. And that was my first kind of chance at public speaking. And it's kind of ironic now because I speak a little bit too much, as people would say. I love speaking.
That's good.
Yeah. And then in 9th grade, I found that they had an FCA there, and I got plugged in right away. And I became co-captain, and I was co-captain all the way up till my senior year. And it was amazing. I got to speak a couple of FCA huddles, and I just got to see my campus grow as a Christian faith. And I got to watch others go into FCA and guide them into leadership. And it was just an amazing thing that God allowed me to do every single year. And He's the one that got me into public speaking. And I spoke at my high school graduation this year, and it all happened because of FCA, I think.
Yeah, it sounds that way. God has a way of putting people in front of other people who are willing to just do what He wants them to do. And it sounds like who you are is a willing heart, someone who says, God says, okay, Avery, it's time to do this. And you go, that's kind of scary, but okay. That sounds like you. Is that right?
Yes. One of the captain's favorite quotes for this past year, his name is Kenneth Orr. He always said, God does not call the equipped, but he equips the called. And so that was our famous quote for this year is, you might not be ready for it, but he's going to call you towards it.
That's right. And that is a very famous quote and a very good quote because it is absolutely on target. Tell us what it was like growing up in your family. What was your family like?
I'll try not to brag too much about my family, but...
No, it's okay. This is the time to brag. This is the time.
I just think they are my biggest blessing in my life. I mean, there's no words to describe my family. I have my mother, which you know dearly, my father, and then an older brother, and then two dogs, Gigi and Mo. They are about 3 years old, and they are just as rambunctious as ever, but I love them. And my parents raised me in the church, but they've always been encouraging me to walk my faith in my way. They didn't want my faith to be their faith. So they always encouraged me to make my own relationship with Jesus. And I highly value them for that because looking back on it now, it's made me so much stronger in my faith. And my brother, a lot of people say we look just alike, but we act completely differently because I'm usually the quiet, reserved one. And my brother is just the life of the party. He is loud. He's outgoing. He knows how to make everyone laugh. And so growing up, it was just a household filled with laughter and love. And they always pushed my brother and I, my parents, to be the best version of ourselves. I mean, my mom was the one who pushed me into FCA a little bit, even though I was kind of scared. And now look where I'm at, and it's all to thank for her.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's just the type of person she is and was. She was always very outgoing herself and always had a very kind spirit about her. That is what I remember most about your mom, and she hasn't changed. She still has that same kind but adventuresome demeanor. Am I right on target with adventuresome?
You couldn't be more right. She is very much adventuresome.
Well, I hope you get to listen to her interview if you haven't listened to it yet, Avery, because she went on a trip to Guatemala that if she hasn't told you about with our student ministry, she needs to tell you about that.
She mentions it all the time, and I love to hear the stories from that trip.
Well, and it was a very iconic trip. She did some things that most students would not do, helping the poor, and it was impressive to all of us that were around. What's one of the things you would tell middle schoolers and high schoolers to help them live their best life at those ages? What would you tell them?
That's a very good question. I feel like there's a lot of advice out there. But if I could give one piece of advice to enjoy middle school and high school to its best life is, I guess, embrace the hardships with joy. I mean, we hear that a lot in the Bible. And I guess surround yourself with the right people, quote unquote. And try to take every step with honoring God as your number one goal. And I say all these three things together because that was my kind of mottos going through high school was first, like every problem I saw, I said, how much of a blessing it is I have this problem. Because a lot of times it was like, oh my gosh, I have to speak in front of the school. But how blessed I am to be able to speak in front of the school. Not every kid gets to do that. And so I would say that there's a lot of different problems we face in middle school and high school trying to find ourselves. But just finding the joy in that makes it so much more just prosperous in the end. And you'll enjoy high school a lot more if you do that. The second part, surround yourself with the right people, quote unquote. I mean, I'm godly people. I mean, FCA was where I went. I mean, I woke up at 5 every single day for FCA at 6:30 in the morning on Thursdays. And it was difficult, but seeing those people, we had music and they were smiling and we all provide breakfast for these high schoolers. And it was all because of these leadership people I surrounded myself with every single day. And I could go to them with any of my hardships and they would help me find the joy in it. And they would lead me to God. They would give me Bible verses. And those were the people that made a difference.
And this is a regular high school campus you're talking about. To some people that are listening to this, they're going, that doesn't happen. Because this podcast goes all over the world, goes all over the United States. You were in a very fortunate place. Tell them a bit about your high school and how in the world Fellowship of Christian Athletes was there, allowing that to happen. I mean, is there some kind of history behind all that?
Yeah, so Eustis High School is a public high school here in Lake County, Florida. So we got a little bit of Southern in us.
Yeah.
And we are a Title I school, meaning that the county, the taxes pay for all of our students' lunches because they did a census around and they found out that most students are unable to afford breakfast at the school every day for school lunches and breakfast. And so breakfast and lunch is free to all students at Eustis High School. So that kind of gives you a background of just where we are as a high school. We're pretty involved in sports and stuff, though, and we're definitely not state. Our girls just won softball state champions, so we got a good girls softball team. So shout out to them.
Yeah, congratulations! Right.
But FCA, I mean, being able to provide an extra breakfast to students once a week every morning it meant more than it did to a lot of schools because a lot of kids didn't get breakfast. I mean, they didn't always make it to the breakfast that the school provided, or maybe it wasn't enough for them because they gave it to the sister at home. They saved it. And so a lot of kids came to us and said, this breakfast means so much to us. I mean, it gets us throughout the school day. And we also were able to hand out a lot of Gatorades and sports drinks to the sports teams and speak to them. And the sports members would come up to us and they'd be like, thank you so much. Like, we didn't bring water to practice today. And so this sports drink, I mean, it's able to get us to practice. And so for FCA, it was a lot of just bringing food and the right supplies to our students because they couldn't afford them like the schools around us. So that was a big part of FCA school, was giving to those in need.
That is really great, amazing, and a Jesus type attitude. I mean, that's what Jesus would do.
That's what we aimed for, yeah.
It's Fellowship of Christian Athletes. You don't have to be an athlete to be in there. But here you were providing for every student, but also for those athletes so they could get through their day.
Yeah, we tried to really reach out to every single group. I mean, we even did the band kids, the theater kids. We wanted everyone at school to know about FCA.
That's amazing. So what were the things or events that brought you to your relationship with Jesus?
It started a long time ago. I told you that I grew up in church, but the first time I remember committing my life to Jesus was at a camp in Colorado. Because I was born there, and I grew up there for a little bit, but then we moved down to Florida because God called us down here as a family. But my parents still sent me up to this church camp in Colorado for a couple of summers after we moved so I could be with my friends. And the camp was called Haji, which sounds like a crazy name, but it stands for I'd rather have Jesus.
Oh, wow.
And I remember I was probably, I'd say 9 or 10, and we all stayed in this big tent together, and it was about 8 girls per tent. And so you're in the mountains with these 8 girls all week, and you're doing games and the sermons every night, and they bring you food, and it's a great time. And at the end of the week, we had a cabin tent counselor, kind of that person that stayed, the adult that stayed with us. We were sitting on the last night of the sermon of worship, and she pulled us outside and asked after the sermon, do any of us want to commit our lives to Jesus? Do we want to call him our Lord and Savior? And I just remember all 8 of these preteen girls just crying, breaking down, including me. And we all stood together and we prayed and we all committed our lives to Jesus. And the next morning they woke us up with pots and pans cleaning at 5 in the morning. And we hiked one of the mountains nearby where they built a cross, and you could see all the area nearby. And I just couldn't stop crying after that hike because I realized like how joyful it was. It wasn't like a joy you can put into words. And that has always stuck to me, that God has always felt in the mountains to me, which is why I'm going back to school there. But that's where I first committed my life to Jesus. And I went back to that camp a couple years, and every time I cried on that mountain, it was just such a monumental mountain to me. And then FCA, I was able to give that testimony in front of all my friends at Fields of Faith. And it was my first time speaking, and my first time ever speaking in front of a large group of people was my testimony. And that really made me feel confident that I could say this because it's my testimony. And then I've gone to a couple church camps and church every Sunday and went through a couple youth groups, but it's always been that one one morning at Ijahaji that's really been in my mind forever.
Yeah, well, that was your encounter with God. Do you remember the name of that mountain?
I do not. I wish I do. It's only 10 years old, so I couldn't remember. But I'm hoping, since I'm moving up there for school, that I could become a camp counselor at that same camp in the next couple of summers.
Well, I'm sure you will. I have no doubt that that's probably going to happen somewhere along the way. At least you'll try to have that happen, and God will open the doors. But I love Colorado, love Denver. When your mom told me that she had married, her husband was from there, I was just like, oh my goodness. I mean, it doesn't get much better. And we said that when we met. And you said that you are more of a mountain person, but your brother is more of a beach person.
Yes, that's what people mean when we look the same, but we're completely different inside.
Yeah, for sure. As you should be. Very much individuals, and your parents have allowed you to be that. And that is an amazing parenting when they are wanting you to find what God's got for you and wanting you to have your own personal relationship with Jesus Christ and growth in that area. What you told me, though, is that you're wanting to go to Cru when you get to Colorado, and you're University of Colorado in Boulder, right?
Yes, sir. That's where my dad went.
Oh, that's I didn't remember that part. That's why I knew he's from Denver. I didn't realize he went to that particular university. So you'd been on that campus before, is that right?
Yes, sir. I visited it last winter. I did a campus tour. It was so cold.
Oh, yeah.
But it was worth it.
And how are you going to handle that cold? Now that you've faced that, had you faced that kind of cold in Colorado before with your family?
Yes, we went skiing up there a couple times, and I actually took off a couple of my layers, mostly because I was so nervous. I was sweating so bad. But I think I'll do all right with a couple of jackets.
Yeah, you'll be fine then, because you've got some acclimation there, and you've done that before. You wanted to go to Cru. How did you know about Cru? Cru used, by the way, for those of you who are older, it used to be called Campus Crusade for Christ. They just shortened the crusade to Cru, so it was more of a catchy name for students and easier to say, too. Tell me about Cru and why you're wanting to join them when you get there.
Well, the way I found out about Cru is that my dad was a part of Campus Crusades when he was at Boulder, when he went to school there. And all of the stories that he tells me about his time in college, a lot of them are about Cru, because it was just he was part of leadership, and he said it was just the most amazing club he's ever been a part of. I mean, they would walk around campus with chalk, and they would write down, like, this is the meeting times, and then they would have ice skating, like sermon trips, and it was just, he has amazing stories. I wish I could tell them as good as he does. But I always knew I wanted to be a part of a campus ministry ever since I joined FCA. Knowing that I'm going to the same school as my dad, I said, well, I wonder if Campus Crusades is still there. And I looked it up, and it was. And so I just was like, okay, let me look into it. What do they do now? And they have their own building they meet at with a big patio. And I don't know too many details yet, but it seems just something I would love, just like FCA, but just more of a youth group style. And my mom also told me about all the youth group things she did in college. We went to a church and joined a youth group there. And she has amazing stories. So I'm just hoping to continue what I've started all the way in 6th grade, just at a different campus.
Your parents doing those things ahead of you, allowing you to grow in your faith personally, in a personal faith, those stories, those matter to you as children. They tell us that some people would say, parents don't have any influence over the kids anymore. But statistics tell us that still the number one influence in adolescents' life are their parents. So obviously that's what's happened with you.
Oh, yeah. They are a big part of my life.
So what's something you do or have done that's a part of your life that's fun, but almost no one knows about? Anything particular that, people just don't know about you, but you just love doing?
Something that I love doing that not a lot of people know is I love crocheting and knitting. It's kind of a grandma activity, but I love crocheting blankets for my family members and gifts. Now, I don't tell a lot of people that because they're like, oh, that's a grandma activity. But I would say a lot of times when I'm giving my parents or my family members gifts, I love making something for them. That's how I show my love, is by spending hours knitting yarn together and making gifts that matter. This past Christmas, I made my brother mittens because he goes to school in North Carolina. And he always comes back complaining how cold it was and how he misses the beach. And I'm like, okay, I got you.
What school is he going to in North Carolina?
He is going to Western Carolina, WCU.
Well, I went to Appalachian State. I was in the mountains as well in North Carolina. So,
Oh, yeah.
yeah, it can get very cold there. So,
I can.
I'm glad you knitted his gloves for him. Anything you wish people would ask you, but they never have?
This might be kind of an odd one, but I wish people asked me why I love mathematics.
Oh,
Sounds kind of nerdy, but I could go on a very long talk about how math and nature and science are just so cool and how God is so smart in mathematics, but we never talk about it.
well, give us a little story about mathematics, a few things about it that you've discovered.
Well, my favorite to talk about is the golden ratio, which is very common in math talk. But essentially, it's this ratio where, let's say you start off with 0 and 1, and you add them together. Now you have 1, obviously. You take the previous number you added, so you had 0 and 1, so the previous number is 1, and you add it to your result, so you get 1 plus 1 is 2. And you continue doing that, so 1 plus 1 is 2, then you do 2 plus 1 is 3, 3 plus 2 is 5, and you go on. And this ratio seems kind of unimportant, but it's actually found in almost all life structures. So seashells, flowers, it's found in all around us. And mathematicians can't really explain why nature follows this one rule. It's called the golden rule for a reason. But there's so many similar rules like that in math. And it just, as someone who loves math and loves learning about it, I'm going into calculus 2 next year, so pray for me. But I just think it's so amazing how difficult math is, yet God makes it look so simple in the trees, in the mountains, in the valleys, in the water. I mean, we never think about how much math goes into every aspect about nature, but God understands all of it, yet it's nothing to him. And that amazes me, how math can be so complex, yet so simple. And I hope to understand that one day in heaven, but right now it exceeds my comprehension.
Well, it may exceed it, but it has captured your comprehension and your thought process.
Yes, it's something I think about often.
Yeah, and there are people who do relate that with God's complexity and his detailed orientation, the way that he processes life and all the things that you said. So well put. Thank you, Avery. I appreciate that.
Of course, thank you for asking.
Best trip or event you and your family have ever been on?
Oh, I'm excited about this. So last summer, my family went on an educational tour offered by one of my online classes. It was just my parents and I, and I actually found a friend out from here that I was going to. And we traveled all around Greece, but our last traveling point was Turkey, where we traveled the ruins of Ephesus.
Oh, wow.
And that was just mind-boggling. Like, just walking the streets of Ephesus and learning all the history. I mean, it was busy and crowded, but I mean, I couldn't believe I was actually there. Like, I've read about Ephesus so much, and I was standing right there.
Did y'all have a guide that told you anything extra about Ephesus while you were there concerning Paul or in his travels or anything?
Not too much, sadly. We asked a lot of the normal Christian questions, but because it wasn't a Christian tour guide, because we didn't get the choice, they try to keep it very more based on the history itself and not the Christian history. My dad and I were hanging out for a lot of it, and he was telling me all these facts that I wish I could pull out right now, but I can't. Having both my parents there, I mean, having them there was amazing because I could just ask them questions and they knew it. I think my parents are the smartest people sometimes.
Yeah, well, they're pretty smart people for sure. Think about one of the sights that you saw. What was one thing that you saw that just almost made you stop in your tracks? It made you emotional. Was there one of those things or two places maybe while walking the streets or something that you couldn't believe that it was there or you were looking at this thing? Was there anything that just kind of in your mind like, whoa?
Yeah, there's two things. One of it was the roads, because there was different worn out areas of the roads, and you could see different styles of roads. So there was the pavement roads, there was the dirt roads, there was the brick roads, and different layers. You could see different civilizations, and you could see they put the time arrows next to it. And that was overwhelming for me because I was like, I mean, so many people have lived here, yet there's a few names that stick out to me, and like these are the roads they walked, and that made me feel like you say walk like the disciples walk in like the path of Jesus, and you're like, I'm actually kind of walking now. Like, you're like, oh my goodness, like that gets you emotional. And then the second part was we went into this building. I think it was either a law building or it was some political building, and they had these big carvings of letters. It was in what was it? It was in Arabic, I believe, and these were old carvings that they had preserved. And I mean, you think about the time it took to chisel those words into the wall, and that I just couldn't stop staring at that, like the hard work that people put into like chiseling words into the wall. And they talked about how the architects back then, like they spent hours and hours chiseling and like their structures. And I don't know, that was something else that just overwhelmed me. Like the time that people took to like build things back then, it just that was, I don't know how to explain that relation to godliness, but just the time people took to build things. It's kind of like how Jesus took the time to build his church, build his disciples. It was just an odd connection I drew there.
And when I'm asking you this, you don't have to apply it to did God do or all that. Some things are just emotional. You know, you're seeing these things, and it's just interpersonal. Whether it's a spiritual connection, emotional connection, or even a physical connection. My feet hurt. I'm walking this road.
Yeah, that was one of the feelings.
That was one of the feelings. Lots of road walking and stuff, which is, their main mode of transportation back then. Okay, worst moment in life.
I guess all worst moments in life are a blessing, so it's kind of like odd. But I would say the biggest blessing that was also a worst moment in life was probably moving from Colorado to Florida when I was younger. I mean, as a kid, I had no friends when I had left. I have this best friend. Her name's Chloe. She lives in Colorado. I see her almost every year. I'm actually her maid of honor. She's getting married this year. But not seeing her every single day because we had lived across the street. I mean, we would see each other every single day. That took a really hard time to get over. And moving from Colorado, I mean, my parents tell me that I cried for every night for a year. That's what they said I did. And so I remember that being a really hard thing to get over. And even 10 years later after moving, I'm still like, I want to go back to Colorado. But I've also had these amazing opportunities in Florida that I don't know if I would have if I was still in Colorado. But still, that moving was really hard for me.
I'm sure. You left your close people and you didn't forget them or leave them out of your life.
Nope, I still keep in contact with those 3 good friends I had back then too.
Best life moments.
I'd say most recently, deciding to go back up to Colorado, saying that I'm going to CU Boulder, because choosing my college was very difficult for me. But when I made that decision, it was a big relief. And in an odd way, I've always felt called back to Colorado by God. It's again one of those inexplainable feelings. And I'm like, I know he wants me there, but not yet. And now it feels like he's saying, okay, now we can get started on this plan I have for you. But it's my timing. And so that was one of the biggest joys, was realizing I'm finally getting started on this calling that he's had for me, but he's always been saying not yet. And I'm so ready to start it. And that was just probably one of the best life moments, was deciding that.
Which leads us to our next question. What is the biggest, most impossible dream you have for your life?
I guess I'll preface this by saying, as a kid, I really wanted to own every clothing store there ever was, because my mom, she majored in fashion, and so I kind of walked in those footsteps a little bit. And I love fashion, I love clothing, I love styling, and that's a big joy of mine. But I would say now I am going into biomedical engineering at CU.
Wow.
Yep, and my hope is to work on prosthetic limbs. And I'll have a little bit of a backstory to why I want to do that, is because I remember working on a research project in my junior year of high school, and I got to choose a subject. And for some reason, I wanted to look at amputees who are also mothers. And so I got the chance to interview a couple of these mothers. And there was one, I'll put her name, Tori Mugo. She lives up in Denver. She's very Christian, but she lost all four of her limbs after going into sepsis. And her son knew her before and after her limb loss. And she told me that the hardest thing after going through that was that her son didn't want to hug her. And then afterwards, when her son did want to hug her, that she couldn't actually hug him all the way because she didn't have all her limbs. And so that really just set into mind, I want to help people like that. I want everyone to be able to hug the family members. I want everyone to be able to run easily without a heavy limb, because a lot of amputees actually, they don't wear their prosthetics because they're so uncomfortable or because they're more of a hindrance sometimes. And so I guess my dream is to make prosthetics available to all amputees around the world, make them affordable, make them eco-friendly, and make them almost kind of, I don't want to say playing God, but almost just like how God made our limbs to be, because, I mean, every part of us is an amazing part of creation, and I don't want anyone to live without the way God made us. And so that would be my dream. Every amputee just is able to have the best prosthetic limb for their life.
That is a great dream. Not only that, the more impossible the dream, the more God loves it, because it means he has to be a big part of it to make it happen.
I love that.
So who do you want to give a big shout out to?
It's a shocker, but I would say my parents. I really owe a lot to them. I really do. They are the most amazing people in my eyes. They have really led me to who I am today. And they are so compassionate, so hardworking. My dad is so hardworking. My mom is too. I mean, they really put in the work for the life I have now. And all I can do is thank them.
Well, let me tell you what. I know that they feel loved and thanked by you because I know them and I met you. Seems like the love of Jesus flows through you.
Thank you so much.
You are welcome, but thank you so much. And that sort of love just absolutely thrills parents who love Jesus themselves. Anything else? What are the thoughts you have? What are we missing here from you that probably we just still need to know? Is there anything else or any thoughts you have?
I'll say the last thing is move mountains. I know it's cheesy, but if you believe in God and if you have that faith with you, he will help you move the mountains in your life. And I guess that would be my last advice. Encourage the others around you to move mountains. I mean, be that light, and nothing will be impossible for you. It's just go for what you dream of. I know it's cheesy, but it's really gotten me pretty far.
Avery, you are a joy. And I am just very blessed, and so is our audience, to have had this time with you.
Thank you. I feel blessed.
You are welcome, and thank you for feeling blessed, because we are blessed to have you. And so I am hoping that after you're in college, a couple of years maybe, get you some time and some new memories and adventures there, that if this podcast is still being recorded, and we hope it is, then hopefully we'll get on here again and say, Avery, what are you doing now and what's God been up to?
I would absolutely love that.
I hope so, and I hope it will happen. Avery, I'm going to let you go. Please tell your family hello and that I love them. I love you in Jesus' name. And I just can't believe this happened and that I got to see you and meet you for the first time this week and get you on the podcast. I am overwhelmed.
Me too. I appreciate it. I will send my family your wishes. And again, a big thank you for having me on here. It's just such a joy.
You've been listening to the Youth Worker on Fire podcast. If you like what you hear, please subscribe and tell your friends. Also, leave a comment and tell us what you think. Stay tuned for more informative episodes.